Hello friends and welcome back to the Mothership. Today we are jumping on that bandwagon and today we are smoking up our very own pork party ribs. Let's get started. Now what I have here is a slab of what they have labeled as baby back ribs, but if I'm being honest, I think these are spare ribs. I think they mislabeled it. These are pretty chunky ribs, probably not baby backs. Let's get them out of the cryovac and let's see what we're working with. Yep, and looking at these guys, I'm pretty sure these are spare ribs. There's no way these are baby backs. Now, as far as trimming, guys, I have a whole bunch of videos out there that you could follow along with. Basically, what you're looking for is to get the membrane off usually and get off some of this junk on the back. Since we are doing individual ribs, though, we could probably get away with not taking the membrane off. But realistically, I'm going to do it anyway. So first thing I want to do is just take off some of this junk on the back side. And then we want to look for the last rib here, which is about right here. We want to pull off all this excess. I'm going to keep all this. I have a nice idea planned for all this excess meat. But since we are only going to be cooking the individual ribs, we essentially just want to take everything down to the last rib. Now there is a little bit of extra flap up top here. I don't feel any cartilage, but I think there's going to be some. I think maybe I'll just take this off and see what it looks like. Yeah, as you can see, there's a little bone right there. So basically what I want to do is just take this off right along that top of that bone. Now the last thing that I want to do is get the membrane off. So I'm just going to stick a knife right underneath it on one of the bones here. You can see it's kind of wanting to come off already. Then get a finger underneath there. Sometimes it comes off in one strip. Other times it's a pain like this one. But get off as much as you can. If you need a grip, the paper towel works great. There we go. Now, honestly, I usually do a better job. I would have taken off a lot more of this and gotten all of the membrane off, but since we're doing party ribs, we're going to be cutting them anyway, so it's not a huge deal. Now, what I want to do, although looking at these, maybe these aren't baby backs, who knows. What I want to do first is I want to get some salt on here. Just like all of my usual cooks, I start with a salt base. So I take the weight of the ribs, and I do about a half teaspoon to a full teaspoon of kosher salt per weight. Since these are about probably half bone, I'll take the weight, divide it by 2, and use that to do my calculation. In this case, these are about 3¼ pounds. Cutting that in half, we're probably about 1½. So I'm probably going to do something like 3/4 to a teaspoon of kosher salt. But what I really want to do is get it completely coated down, put it in the fridge, and let it absorb completely. I also want to take off a little bit of the silver skin that's on here. Now you don't need to bother with putting salt on the other side because A, it won't be absorbed because that's bone and fat. So get your salt on and then we're going to go ahead and put it in the fridge, let all that salt be absorbed. About 2 hours later and all of our salt, as you can tell, has been absorbed. Now, to make party ribs be party ribs, the real trick here is we actually have to cut the individual ribs, which is kind of weird. But as you're going through them, some of them are curved, so you kind of want to get an idea of where the bones are before you cut. But what we want to do is separate all of them with leaving a decent amount of meat on either side. That way everybody who gets a rib gets a nice and juicy and meaty one. Now, having never made these before, guys, I'm going to be honest, I'm skeptical about the quality of the ribs we're going to get on the other side versus, doing low and slow for 6-7 hours. But I think one of the biggest perks of doing this style of ribs is the fact that we can get rub all over these suckers. So at this point, you could use a binder, you could use whatever you want, but since we did a salt bath beforehand, basically that drawed out a whole bunch of moisture from the ribs. That's just the nature of putting salt onto your meat. So these are actually nice and tacky, which means that all of the rub we want to put on these is going to attach to them. So for rub today, I'm going with my Crop Circle Honey Barbecue rub. It's a really nice sweet rub, but I also added a decent amount of extra heat. So my usual rub, and then I added in some chili powder because I wanted a little bit more spice today. But what we're going to do is get all of the sides coated down. And as always, guys, I will have the entire recipe, including the rubs, down below. So if you want to make this at home, you absolutely can follow along. The only weird, I guess you could say, ingredient that you need would be the honey granules, which you can find on Amazon. Honestly, it's worth having in your kitchen. I use them for a whole bunch of stuff. I love this rub. And having the honey granules means I can add a little bit of sweetness without having that clumping or just straight sugar. And sometimes liquid honey isn't something you want to add on to a meal for, multitude of reasons. But get these coated down. And then what I'm going to do is put them back in the fridge. I'm not ready to throw these onto the Vortex yet. But what I want to do is let everything kind of meld together and be ready to go. So back into the fridge we go. And I think it's about time for me to start getting that Vortex set up. So let's go outside and see what we need to do. Okay, let's get this fire going. What I'm going to do is obviously light my little starters down here. And then as you can tell, I have a very full charcoal chimney. I'm going to let this go nice and hot, and this is going to go directly into my Vortex. Now, as far as cooking these guys, standard rib rules apply. I'm looking for a little over 200 degrees. I'm probably going to throw some corn on at some point, and I don't like how one end is hitting the fire, so I'm probably going to flip them about halfway through. I'm going to do maybe half an hour, then flip them, and then after an hour, I think that's my point where I'll check to see what the temperatures are and how they're getting as far as close to doneness. But putting the wood on top, that's going to allow it to smolder and get some smoke on there. So let's close her up and let it run. Now, party ribs have been popular for a couple of years, guys, and honestly, there's a lot to like about them. You are cutting up the rib and you are coating each side with your rub, which means you're gonna get flavor all around them. The problem though is, honestly, if you're doing something like a Vortex, you're cooking them really hot and fast, so you're not getting a lot of smoke on them, which is a concern. For me, guys, these honestly look like they're fried, which is really nice. There's a good level of just crispiness on the outside of them. They're pretty beautiful. I mean, if you're just looking at this rib, it looks pretty good. But the proof is going to be in the pudding, and I think it's about time to give the old-fashioned chomp. So, let's see how we did. Now, obviously, these are not going to be, fall off the bone ribs, but they have a nice bite to them. They're really, really good. A lot of that is mostly just the salt and the flavor we put on the rub, but they're super good. I'm actually kind of surprised. I expected there to be more, cooked like it's a barbecue type of rib. These have a good smoke flavor. I think that's probably because I put a bunch of smoke on there as we're cooking them. But I am surprised. I was expecting something much worse than we actually got. To be honest, they're not as good as just low and slow for 6 or 7 hours, but they are pretty darn good. I think if you did a sauce on them, you can maybe get every single type of flavor you're looking for. You can do some that are, X, some that are Y, some that are Z, and get a very different profile of ribs. But for us just doing one slab, I think honestly, I'm probably going to do low and slow the entire rack and leave the party ribs to maybe a party. But guys, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are. Do you love doing ribs like this? Do you cut them all up and do a different flavor? I'd be super interested to know what you guys are doing. Most importantly though, please let me know down below what is your favorite type of ribs. And as always, guys, cook some fantastic. I'd love to see what you're cooking up. But most importantly, cook some good. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.